let's do this. This is... Which patron requested this? This is Anthony. Okay, let's do it. Thank you, Anthony.
One of my earliest memories is of a time when my parents were going through a divorce, and there was kind of...
I hope you don't mind, y'all. Like, I love covering the technique, but I want to know more about the artist because I feel like that's important.
Like a lot of turmoil in my house, and my Nana Reese, who was an evangelist, was there, and I just remember her sitting and talking to me and laying her hands on me and saying, everything's gonna be all right, you're gonna get through this, your dreams are gonna come true. And it's like, who even knew what my dreams were back then? But one thing I do know is that music has always been very closely linked to spirituality for me, and I know that without it, I never would have gotten through.
I didn't realize she was religious. It makes sense now. I mean, she's got the cross, and she's done so many performances of religious music. I never put two and two together.
Any situation in my life, and I'm just grateful to God for giving me this gift. Didn't mean it when I said I didn't love you so. I should have held on tight, I never should have let.
Someone's made a mistake on the levels.
I couldn't have fathomed I would ever be without your love. Never imagined I'd be sitting here beside myself.
I'm mad at this sound guy. This is very quiet.
Didn't mean it when I said I didn't love you so. I should have held on tight, I never should have let you go.
It's really important to appreciate Mariah's songwriting here, which is maybe going to be my focus right now. This is a great introduction to the tune in that the rhythm is very, very nice and interesting. And she can get in, when you can get in a lot of words, you can set a scene. The difficulty is that when you set the scene with this many words, you have to be very, very clear on the words. And her diction is fantastic. You can hear every syllable and consonant and vowel, but the sound guy just it's not up to the level. The thing that's challenging here, she set herself up for a very difficult situation with the hi-hats being as consistent as they are. It becomes a challenge to hit it. You don't have a lot of wiggle room. When you have percussion, you can tell most of her songs, the hi-hats are not as frequent, and the rhythm is a little bit more spaced out. And when you have that spaced out, you can play with time. You can slow down, you can speed up. But when you have a situation where the camera is curved, oops. When you have a situation where this consistent hi-hat is there, it becomes more and more difficult. You have to be on time.
Stupid, I was foolish. I was lying to myself, baby. I couldn't have...
And in order to adjust for that, now, we've talked a lot about onsets, but I want to talk about her breaths and her catch breaths. It's an inhale, right? But it's important to know that what she's not doing is she's not gasping for air. And we can tell that actually by her, if we look at her chest for purely technical reasons. We can see that there is an expansion at the torso, but it's very quick, and it's not, you don't hear a, you hear a sound when people have a lot of tension, and they're trying to force their torso to expand a little bit. You can do this normal breath here without that sucking in sound. The sucking in sound is bad for two reasons. One, it means you have torso tension. Two, it means you're taking way too much air, for which there are grave consequences. The consequence of too big of a breath in this instance is not so bad, but I will point it out to, when it comes up, why these small, really good catch breaths are really important. This. This is where this sort of this becomes really important with the catch breaths. To very effortlessly go up like that. So if I have like, let me just use so if I do like just a simple passage and I take too much air, this is what's going to happen. I'm tanking up, filling everything, right? I will find my way. I start to lose the control. It starts to go off pitch. I will find, right? And then the other problem is this. Yes, good. So in one of the last videos with Mariah, we talked about how it's very, very important that the high note is the apex of the phrase in terms of how thick your vocal folds are going to be. So if I tank up, hi, that's very loud, right? That's not going to work as the apex of the phrase. So, and even if I wanted to hold it back, that's not very successful. And the tone has consequence. My larynx pops up there. I think anyone's would, because it's a matter of breath pressure. So, the next part of this point is that with smaller breaths, you have more control. I will find. So when the apex of the phrase, when the high note, aka the apex of the phrase, becomes the priority, you'll see that it looks kind of like this in terms of volume. The first note is the smallest, there's a little bit of an increase in the second, but the third note, bam. So in order for this to happen, if you want to hit a note gently, you have to be very, very diligent about the air you use. So this is common. This is common when you want a high note to be the apex of the phrase. So this is where Mariah is not doing what is common. She's jumping up. And she's making the high note delicate. And she's not doing it by flipping into falsetto. It's very light. Her larynx is high. It's a very little bit of air, but it's not entirely disconnected folds, so it's not pure falsetto. And the reason why that's significant in terms of the falsetto is that you can't, with falsetto, you can get away with blowing too much air because then your folds just flip, and there's not too much of a consequence for just blowing a lot of air through falsetto. You might go flat, but that's about it. But when you want to do any sort of connection with the folds, you have to go very, very, very light. So this is only possible, and this was set up right here with these catch breaths. You have to maintain relaxation as you go for these. This song is great in terms of, let's just talk songwriting for a second. So we start off with, again, the ability to set the scene with a lot of words, right? And she's really close with the hi-hats there, so rhythmically very, very tight. So when she has, a particular part of the story that means a lot, she'll give it an extended line there so that we can better hear it. So when she sets up, you didn't know me, I didn't know you. So, big word comes in, the phrasing is markedly different, and, it's a bit more legato. Right, and then we're getting to more of the dramatic part of the storytelling. This is fun. So her offsets, and she didn't do this before, her offsets are very tight. Not like in a bad way tight. So if I'm singing, sorry, let's go lower. So if I have too much breath, there's that like artifact as I try to glottal. See, like it doesn't, they don't close immediately. When I do softer, so what's the point of that? Why does that matter? Because this goes back to breath management and being able to close off the folds very, very quickly. So right here is where she's going to do offsets. So at this point in her career, Mariah has a wonderfully, wonderfully like rich low and a rich voice in general. So if you're going for rich, there we go. You need quite a bit of air. Let me show you the difference between not having a lot of air and having a lot of air. Right? So this is with a lot of air. Okay. Loud. Got a lot of resonance. Now let me show you the contrast here. A lot of air. If she packs in too much air, she is not going to be able to do quite a few things. A lot of things get taken off the shelf, a lot of options. So one of the options that gets off the table is that offset. Right? You don't want that lurch. It's not a very attractive sound. So in order to pull that off, she has to do the second one of these options, right? So, but that's very soft, right? So she's going back to a trick that she used to do when she would do runs. And this is a trick a lot of singers use when they have good mic technique. They get up together with a round vowel, and they get up on it, and that will increase the sound of that. But normally, where she was using it earlier in her career to make runs audible in her lower range, which was not as big as it is now by virtue of the fact that her folds have grown. That was just a thing that comes with age. So she's not doing it because she can't have lush low notes. She's doing it so that she can use very little air on these offsets and have the rhythmic interpretation that she's doing vocally and technically, but then also have the lower notes be audible and sound large. So she gets up on it, right? So again, just to mark the difference. The first one, a lot of resonance, a lot of air, but then you can't do clean offsets. The second is less air, but you can see it right here. Let me zoom in on her, actually, just because it's really cool. You can see the pursed lips. Even from here, you can see the pursed lips and that she's right up on it. Ooh, really nice. Sorry, my face is gone. I just kind of got into it. I think this is a matter of the folds getting lax. This little fry here. I used to think that was really dangerous, because I used to think it meant that there was too much air going in, and so the bop, 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 bop happened, and then that's bad. But actually, upon talking to my voice and speech pathologist contact and just thinking about it, it doesn't make sense that would be harmful. It's tiring when the folds start flopping together, that's for sure. But if you're really having a hard time with high notes, that's going to mean they blow open. So it's not going to be that they're so relaxed that they kind of come together often. So in order to achieve folds that lax, that's false folds. Still false folds. I've practiced so much with the false folds there that I'm having a hard time with this. There we go. That sounds like snoring. That's the real folds, and oh my god, that drives me up. So that takes very, very, very relaxed folds, and it takes very little air. Her belts, as she's gotten older, it's interesting. In some instances, they're thinner because she needs thinner folds to achieve what she used to do with thicker folds. Again, people change with age, the instrument changes. But in some cases, like, and I remember the first time I was reacting to one of her older performances in 2008, I was like, see how the belt is much more thin, and then she finished off with like an F5 at like full volume, and I was like, well, I feel like an idiot. So to get that much of a sound when you go in belt, you actually need less air. And so this is the theme that we're kind of seeing today. When you have what's called a patter song, which is like the modern major version of a major minor general, something like that, where there's a lot of words, right? So in the beginning she did that. You need to be very relaxed, which also goes into breath control. And then that also is required for the offsets that we talked about here, and the things that she did with the mic technique in order to compensate for the trade-off that those offsets have. Then that's ridiculously clean, particularly these consonants. Anytime you have a consonant where you build up breath pressure, that goes counter to what we just talked about, right? Where you need less air to hit higher notes. So if you have like all of these consonants build up breath pressure. So it's very, very, very important to have the consistency of air as you go through those consonants. So let's go back to Science Town. So what do I mean by consistency of air? Here's what I mean. We belong together. That's not consistent, right? What would be consistent is this. We belong together. And it doesn't look like much, but let me do it side by side so you can see it. We belong together. We belong together. So you'll see that the resonance on the top is weaker, and that there is a lot of inconsistencies between the two notes, particularly on the beginning notes, right? Second, on the third note there's a big dig. It happens too on the one on the right, but not to the same extent. Most of all, and this is important, you can actually see, if I bring in my white thing, then we zoom in, you can see that the last note is actually flat here. I'll just put it right there. So this note, you see how this on the left, this last little frequency on the left of the first phrase is actually lower. See if I can do this precisely. It's lower than this one to the right of the white little thing, right? So this is flat. High notes become exceptionally difficult when you don't have consistent breath. The reason I bring this up is because she's in a phrase with what we call high tessitura, meaning the average note that she is singing is quite high. It's a high tessitura. So the air, even though she sounds like she's punching each note, that's actually just a matter of her hitting the consonants. She's not punching each note. She's gliding like, way dun 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 dun, right? Consistent air used to the consonants to create the illusion that she's punching every high note. But in reality, she's very precise with her breath control and very, very smooth and very, very little. But I'd also argue that she's so used to doing that it doesn't compromise. She doesn't have to overly consider it, and so she can get into the performance. It's not that it's disingenuous that she's hitting these notes with a lot of passion and power. It's just also done in a way that is, good technique, right? So it's a little cool thing. There's something really, really, really cool about when she does a sudden onset. So remember when we were talking about the offset, like being like, huh, that like lurch there? When she starts a note with what we would call an aspirate abrupt, which looks like this. Huh. When we have the start of that note there, you see how it's like flat on the left? That is the folds coming together very quickly, and not gradually, hence aspirate abrupt. When we hear her do them, she has this really cool effect because she has nodules. So when they come together, they actually have that lurch that I was talking about before. So that anytime she has that aspirate abrupt, so that little pop, it's so subtle, but it pops up like, and just like for a second. Place was very, very, very key on that. That was actually a great instance to talk about that. So what that is that the folds are in the process of coming together, but because she has the nodules, they don't close immediately. And so her onset has this really, really vulnerable sound to it. I think that's cool. I think it's really cool because you really can't, like Bonnie Tyler had her own thing. Miley Cyrus, right? That's the name of her. I don't even know. I forget which one is her and then which one is the Disney person, but I think it's Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus has vocal damage and works around it as well, and so did Bonnie Tyler. But neither of them did this, because with Mariah, there's not a tremendous amount of damage as much as there is these polyps and the nodules, which are like little pieces of callus on your vocal folds from too much use. So everything else is clean that she's doing for the most part. And then she'll do that. And I think that's really, it's just, I don't know. To me, it's such a cool thing about her voice that only she can really do, unless another singer has nodules and knows about aspirate abrupts. But she is the person in the limelight that does that. And I think it's really cool. One thing I will say is that so as she's sustaining that note, please don't be mad, Mariah fans. She has superhuman technique, but everyone has a day where they may be physically more tight than they would have been otherwise. And so that is a hair flat, which is okay, because she fixes it. Sustaining a note that's not working out for you is usually a terrible idea, right? Because you're committing to the mistake. But if you know what you're doing, you can fix it as you go, even if your body is not with you that day. So she gets off of the belt and then offsets it with the thyroid tilt. So we hear that little grindiness, which when it's sustained like this, what it is that she's trying to keep her folds together, but there's too much air coming out. And then she adjusts with a thyroid tilt. So when we do the cricoid tilt for belting, and we have these really thick folds, it will not handle excess air because they'll start like rubbing together and do that. It's very, very, very persnickety, I guess we could say. It just doesn't like a lot of hair. Neither does the thyroid tilt, but the thyroid tilt deals with it better. It's just, it's a easier thing to do. Although belting is more consistent, the thyroid tilt can handle a little bit more air. Also, she doesn't tilt it that much. So that's a really, really cool and clever way to transition out of that situation. What I like a lot about it is that a classical singer can't do that, and someone who only knows to belt can't do that. So you have to know both. One of the things that is really, really cool about this performance, but also like, holy crap, I can't believe she went that direction. She almost has, I don't think she has an ounce of reverb on her voice. Why does that matter? When you don't have reverb, there's no hiding. So if I do, have you ever gone to karaoke, right? And then like everybody just has the most amount of reverb humanly possible. The reason is because it's like a way that mistakes will not be as obvious, right? So if I do if I do like a Hercules, like go the distance, I am on my way. When I was up there, slight mistake there because I didn't start gently enough on the bottom. Now if I put reverb on that, I am on my way, it just sounds a little bit sweeter, although that was a lot of reverb. So doing no reverb is quite the commitment. So these little high note things right here, she's struggling with these a little bit. She's still hitting the pitches clean, but it's not. She has to concentrate on it for right now. And it's interesting that happens when there's a lot of fold separation, because in her mix, right, when the folds are together, she's killing it. When she flips into falsetto here, it's a little under. Falsetto can be very, very tricky. So much air escapes that if you don't manage it correctly, this will happen. Now, in, what is it, in like the 7 or 8 or 9 Mariah videos I've watched, this is the first time it's not perfect, which I'm fine with. No one is ever going to be sent perfect, or that's how you know that they overdub everything or they have a lot of auto-tune. So 2 things are right here that I love, is that she's singing honestly. She doesn't have a lot of reverb, right? And I would imagine this is a day where she doesn't feel like super loose and super in her best voice, where she can like just go out there and like sing and everything is correct. These days happen to everybody. Even like the singer Carlo Berganzi was considered like the best Verdi tenor ever. I remember my roommate putting on a recording of him doing the first aria of Aida, which is a very difficult opera. And the first aria with the tenor is hard. It's a very difficult one to start out on. And so he screwed it up big time. It was terrible. He was flat. There was all sorts of mistakes. And this is a guy who's supposed to be, this is his wheelhouse. This is what he's good at, right? So these days happen, right? And she could have overdubbed it. She could have, lip sync, but she didn't. This is why I respect her, because she's generous like that. Also, whenever she does have this quote-unquote mistake or slip-up, she fixes it pretty much every time. As she's doing the third time, this is way better than the first two. And then that's right on the money. For her to make that note pristine only took her 4 attempts. What the most difficult thing about the voice as an instrument is that the body, there are 200 something muscles in the body, right? Each one affects the other. So when you wake up, you have any number of like, it's just different every day. So part of a warm-up is going to be basically making sure that your stuff's working. That's the only real reason that it's a good idea to warm up. It has nothing to do with vocal health, unless you're going to do a difficult piece and you don't find out where you're at that day, right? So it takes years of singing every day, regardless of what your body is going through, to be able to make adjustments on the fly like this. And that is just a marvelous correction. What is she doing there? Well, she has a little bit more adduction of the folds. That's the adjustment she made. There's a little bit more connection between the folds. Boom, problem solved, taken care of. How does she do that? A little bit more air, just a tiny bit. Ooh. This is more of that like really cool onset from the nodules, and she's doing it several times here, which is, I love it. This is really nice. She's really with the backup singers here. So that adjustment that she's made is persisting, right? So instead of going full falsetto, listen to this. It's a little bit more of the folds connected. That's smart. So in Alexander technique, there's a principle of, I actually have chills. It's so smart. In Alexander technique, you basically relax so that when you get hype, you're not really stiff. The stiffness and the tension has been one of her major difficulties so far. She's been navigating it, but she hasn't been thriving. So, and she couldn't really adjust or do anything else because she was singing this whole time. Now she gets this break after this. She has a moment. See her calm herself down? So, particularly, I'm going to actually point out the physical changes. Watch the shoulders come a little bit more forward and the head raise, and the posture in general is way better. When we relax, that's when our posture really comes into play. And this has immense consequences on breath. So she does this in like one moment. And any great singer that I've ever heard has amazing posture and amazing ways to carry themselves physically. This to make this correction in such a short amount of time is really impressive. You can see it immediately. Her neck is longer, the shoulders are more relaxed and a little bit more forward, whereas they were back before. The other thing that she does here, she doesn't take an inhale. You can actually see her taking an exhale, which is smart. As a consequence of those shifts, this is perfection, this high note. This belt is amazing. Then she goes up, right? This is like, when I have a bad voice day, it takes me hours to make fixes. She just did it in 5 seconds. That's I'm jealous of that level of ability. Dang, she's killing it. She went from having some difficulties and she's being careful and tentative, and now she's just completely in her element. She's lowering her soft palette here to change the tone a little bit, just as a matter of fact. I mean, what do you even say? Like, you want my technical analysis? That's good. Oh my God. Every time I hear gospel, every time I hear someone give it up for their religious beliefs, the commitment into the performance every time just puts basically every singer outside of gospel to shame. Hold on. Wait. That wasn't total whistle. That's actually something else. Oh my God. I think she's using the area epiglottic sphincter with whistle. No! That's a thyroid tilt with whistle. What the? Hold on. Let me just see if this is correct. I don't want to say something if it's not. Let me just see her whistle notes in general. So notice how there's no vibrato here. Right? It's mainly straight in this one. Because there's vibrato. The vowel is incredibly bright, but also I'm convinced that her area epiglottic sphincter is contracted. What is the area epiglottic sphincter? If I sing opera, I'll do an example. The example will be without and then with. Una amoro. Let's go a little higher. Una amorosa. And I'll add it. Una amorosa. Right? I'm actually not... a little under, but whatever. I haven't warmed up. All right. So you can see that when I add the area epiglottic sphincter, there's the frequencies in the upper end are just tremendous there, right? Whereas they're sort of very meek prior. So that's what the area epiglottic sphincter does when you contract it. And these things exist just above the vocal folds, right? So, yeah, that's pretty cool. So she's doing a whistle, tilting her thyroid cartilage, and contracting her area epiglottic sphincter, and it sounds metal AF. So good. And you can hear it, right? Like it's so, oh my God. Like when we were listening to that versus like, what was the other one? Like it's night and day. It's night and day, the difference. It's so cool. Dang. I think for me, like, oh my God. It's like, no singer is perfect. And if you don't go for stuff, like if you're always trying to be safe and sing to impress and not make mistakes, you're never going to give like an emotional performance. And what I hate about the internet and people in general, because this even existed before the internet was a thing, people like to tear down singers, any singer, right? Mariah gets this a lot in particular, but it happens to everybody. They hear one thing and all of a sudden they're like, oh, nope, that's no good. Like, and not only did like the mistakes not happen in a dramatic way, she fixed them on the fly, and she sung to express, not impress. So it's just, I don't know, man, like, I don't know. I don't understand haters with the voice, like, and hating on singers. Like, it makes a little sense to me. No one's ever going to be perfect. But if we want our singers to be perfect, they're never going to go out on a limb here emotionally, like she did. That gets me every time. I want that to be my ringtone. How obnoxious would that be? Oh, excuse me, I gotta take a call. Right? Amazing. Anyway, thank you for the recommendation, Anthony. Appreciate it.